everyone. My name is Sandra Womack. I am an adoption support consultant for the Department of Children, Youth, and Families from Tacoma, Washington, and part of the Minority Professional Leadership Development Cohort 4. Today, I'm going to talk to you about how to help parents support their children's social and emotional health, evidence-based practice interventions. And this is based off of the information through my literature review on the subject of dissolution of adoption. But as you know, adoption is a lifelong event. When we're talking about adoption, oftentimes what comes to mind is celebration, love, joy, family, and permanence. These words are often used to describe adoption, but what happens when adoption falls apart? The reality for some children being adopted does not mean that they get their happily ever after. I would like you to think on the image of an adoption event. What comes to your mind? As my research project is a paradox to that image. At the same time, there were encouraging findings that provided validation to the work we do every day for the children we serve, and I'm very excited to share that with you. I started my state service 19 years ago, serving families and children in various capacities that united families together, either by reunification or through creating families through adoption. I continue this important work in post-services supporting adoptive families. The work of social work is very personal to me because the passion for this work perfectly intersects with my own personal story of loss and hope. I am Black and Asian, that's my race. My ethnic background is Asian and my nationality is Korean. My primary language is Korean. Although I have almost 2 decades of serving families, the call to social work really began when I was a little girl. I was born in Korea to a Korean mother and a Black father. At the age of 2 years old, due to circumstances, my birth mother left and did not raise me. From my own personal experience of loss, shaped my desire to work with children from the foster care system who have also experienced loss. That is why National Adoption Day will forever hold a very special place in my heart, because that day was also my first day as an adoption social worker. I knew my purpose was to help each child have their happy ending. I was honored to have placed over 200 children with their forever families. There is no better feeling than to see a child find their family they can call their own, and I helped make that happen, and it changed me forever. That is why to think that after the judge had banged his gavel and signed the decree of adoption, parents could dissolve their adoption in the same legal pathway in which they have acquired their child. My fantasy world of adoption was destroyed by one word: dissolve, like a divorce. Adoption is not so permanent after all. This reality was not what I have ever imagined a child would have to go through the second time. This is a reason why this topic of dissolution intrigued me. It was important for me to know what went horribly wrong, and can we as an agency support our adoptive parents in their preparation to prevent this outcome? I needed answers. During our time together, I will lay out for you today the process of my presentation in this order: background, definitions, literature review, case reviews, listening session, my PICO, the training that I provided, the data from the training, and my MPLD impacts. To touch on the background, as you know, my personal story and the impacts that National Adoption Day brings, because it is a day that is recognized by every state as a day of celebration to bring awareness to the reality that there are waiting children to be matched to a loving family. In my research, I wanted to examine the numbers of dissolutions and adoptions in the state of Washington, and to determine if the literature review matched up to the data findings in the state records. Just to ground us a little bit in the literature review, the key terms that will be used during this presentation are the definition of dissolution, which is defined in this report as a legal process of dissolving or ending an adoption, which occurs after the adoption has been legally finalized. Evidence-based practice, which is consistent of the best research evidence and the best clinical experiences and are consistent with family and client values. Social emotional health is the ability to understand and manage our emotions and to form social connections and relationships with the world around us. So what did I find in the literature? The primary reasons for adoption and Safe Families Act of 1997 is to promote the adoption of children in the foster care system and set timelines for permanence. Since the passage of ASFA, adoptions have increased by 57%, but there is a pause for concern. Actually, we do not know if adoptions are successful across the lifespan of the adoption journey because there's no clear data tracking to actually know if they are permanent. In general, adoptive families will navigate the challenges the best they can, as all parents do. However, for some adoptive parents, the only option left is a decision to relinquish their rights to their child through the process of dissolving their adoption. When children return to foster care after an adoption or guardianship has been finalized, this is referred to as a permanency dissolution. About 1% of children entering foster care each year had previously been adopted. Some of the services that really support families are the pre and post adoption, which is helpful to be one of the protective factor in changing that outcome. I looked deeper after I conducted the literature review. I went and looked at our agency record. It was not random for the purpose of looking at specific information from these cases of dissolved adoption. Because according to the literature, race, age, sibling group, behavioral problems are risk factors of adoption dissolution. Therefore, when I was looking at the agency case record, those were the things that I highlighted in my findings. So the children that were dissolved in 2017 and 2018 from our state records were 25 children, and 17 of the parents were part of the 25 children. And the records that were collected as I was looking at specific characteristics were age, race, gender. And I also looked at parents' characteristics, if they were married, if they were single, what kind of educational background they had, what their race and age, and if they had any biological children. I also looked at the relationship prior to the adoption, due to the literature highlighting that strangers heighten the risk of dissolution. So when I reviewed the case from our records, I found that 44% of the parents had prior relationship with their adopted child because they were foster parents. 32% were other relative by birth or marriage, and 24% was non-relative. Out of those parents, only 52% took any type of pre-adoption training, and part of that training, only 12% participated in a course for adverse childhood experiences. Just to highlight this, other relatives, for the state of Washington, if relatives are not licensed, training is not an ongoing requirement. Therefore, the findings were not surprising to know that it was less than what I had hoped in this case review. The percent for various race and ethnic groups were examined in the case findings. Most notable is that children who are white make up nearly 68%. 76% of parents are white, and 6% of parents are other race, compared to 18% of Black parents and 32% of Black children. This was pretty interesting as we were looking at disproportionality and disparity in our work. As you could see that 76% of parents was white and 32% of children that were adopted in that household was Black. And therefore, when we're looking at policy and practice, transracial adoption and education around cultural needs are very important. The agency identifies as age a special needs category as well when we're looking at what was pre and post adoption special needs. For the purpose of this presentation, when we're looking at special needs, these are eligibility criteria for our adoption support program. So we capture what were the children's special needs identified before they were adopted. 10 of the children were at risk. That means that given their predisposition to family factors, they may have certain types of needs as they grow up. So 10 out of those 25 children before they were adopted was classified as at risk. 8 of the children had identified mental health needs. 2 of the children were medically fragile, and 2 of the children have physical health needs. And 3 of the children, for the purpose of identified sibling group, was adopted together in one household. After adoption, one of the children still met the at-risk factor. 19 of the children's mental health needs was identified. 2 of the children remain medically fragile. They just got older with their needs still being identified as it was before they were adopted, same as physical health needs. And there were no sibling groups in terms of post-adoption when they came back into care. 2 of the siblings were placed in different homes. And 3 of the children were identified as being older than age 6. And these were after they had came back into care once the adoption dissolved. So what contributed to the 25 children re-entering the foster care system after adoption? The data show that the primary reason for re-entry in foster care was child abuse and neglect, which was at 52%. And the second reason was due to youth behaviors. And the third reason was due to a death of an adoptive parent. Some of the encouraging findings after was that 25 of those children, 64% was subsequently adopted. To me, that was encouraging because when I started this project, my assumption was that once they re-enter the foster care system, that my idea was that they were not going to be adopted, that they will be aging out of the system. To find this finding as where these kids ultimately was adopted after a dissolved adoption and after the number of losses that they have experienced was very encouraging. And it also speaks to how the agency is doing in terms of making sure that these kids are able to be connected to another family, regardless of the loss that they have experienced. 8% did age out of the system once they reached the age of majority. 8% did opt to stay in foster care through the extended foster care program. 16% still remains in foster care, waiting for an adoptive home or permanent situation. 4% did return home with their birth family of origin through a reinstatement of parental rights. So one of the things that I looked at in terms of the limitations to my case review and finding was that it was a small sample size. It didn't really give me enough to generalize exactly what the reasons were just based off of the 25 cases of why families decided to dissolve their adoption. The initial plan was for me to receive the IRB approval, but when that wasn't granted, for me to conduct an interview with parents that have dissolved, it limited my scope in understanding the deeper reasons as to why they may have dissolved. So that was the weakness and limitations to my sample. So I did have to pivot, and I still want to get the information from adoptive parents. Therefore, I conducted a listening session. I had a total number of 3 listening sessions. There were 16 parents that attended this listening session. And 12 out of the 16 parents did provide a survey. I developed the questions for the listening session as well, the demographic survey for the listening session. I invited the parents by emailing them, and we held a virtual listening session with the 2 agencies, Amara on Zoom, and the second listening session was a hybrid, being virtual and in person through Olive Crest. So one of the things that we talked about was these questions specific to what they feel that they wanted to share. And these questions were designed to solicit the information that was needed for me to create my intervention. So the question that was asked is, did you have concerns while making your decision to adopt? The feedback received was concern about parenting children who have special needs and those that have experienced trauma. That's huge, because I think for a lot of our families, when they're going through just the day-to-day and parenting their child and really don't know how to address those needs as the trauma experience arise, they feel helpless. Just like the other question related to that, what has been the most challenging time of your parenting journey with your child? Can you identify the reasons why it was difficult? The feedback received was, when the results of the prior trauma begins to affect the child, there is no gradual shift. It was okay until it wasn't. When parents describe this feeling as feeling helpless, not really knowing what to do, that is really the most scary part. Is not being able to know what the next steps are to help their child develop coping skills to change the result. So when I asked the question, if your parenting journey was difficult, can you identify why it was difficult? And in the same line as, it was difficult when I did not know what to do to help my child. So that led me to asking them this question: what information trainings do you think you would have benefited from to prepare you for your adoption journey? The common theme from the parents were that there needs to be additional trainings that are targeted for different types of families and specific age groups of the youth. For example, if they adopted a child as an infancy, then what to anticipate when they're toddlers and school age and when they're adolescents. Most adoptive parents have received training. They express it did not go deep enough. Teenage years are the toughest with trauma hitting and needing more information on transracial adoption and not knowing what to do to help their child and feeling hopeless because you don't know where to go to get the support you need. These sentiments expressed was powerful, And I really do applaud the adoptive parents' honesty and transparency in these conversations, because it really actually led me to develop an intervention that would really impact what they need for my action research project. And so getting this information through the listening session and hearing from the adoptive parents really made the intervention really more impactful as I was working through this project. So as part of my PICO, this was what I needed answers to. If adoptive parents receive information on evidence-based practices, will they report increased knowledge regarding evidence-based practice interventions that can help support their child's social and emotional health? So based off of this, adoption stability is really the key to eliminating dissolution. So we need to ensure that adoptive parents are receiving the best support beyond fostering. So part of that helped me develop the IEP, which is incorporating evidence-based parenting, because social and emotional well-being is critical in the regulatory response. The literature also reported that early intervention and supports can improve the course of a child's development in both short and long term. So the intervention really shed a light on helping adoptive parents know that there's effective intervention modality that can engage at any stage of their child's development throughout their adoption journey. So the training really, what we did was we looked at the training modalities. I took 15 minutes, and usually it took a little bit longer depending on question, but it was a one-on-one virtual training that was held 4 different dates. 5 parents did participate in that training. There was a retroactive survey that was completed by 4 attendees. And part of that training was obviously incorporating the evidence base, and this really helps support and bring a real life understanding to the child that they were parenting. A lot of the things that I did hear from the family was that this information would have been helpful early on in their decision to adopt. And as a result of this training, they did have a better understanding on how to strengthen their adoption journey. They were able to learn about different evidence-based services available, and they were able to provide feedback on the services used for this training. So I went through all of the concept of different modalities with them, including the evidence base that was available, promoting first relationship if they were raising children from ages birth to 3 years old, incredible years if they had a child from ages birth to all the way to 8 years old, and then parent-child interaction therapy, which is a really strong modality when you're working with that connection piece. In ages 2 to 7, this is like a critical stage where that social and emotional needs are heightened as they gain some independence, and they're also going to school. Functional family therapy really targets these pre-adolescent and adolescent stage where there is conflict around communication, differences in perspective. Some could be age appropriate, but given the needs of the children and the population that we serve, our children have heightened trauma impacts. Therefore, it may look maladaptive in their behavioral response. So functional family therapy is really a critical piece to this. And then positive parenting program, we really encourage families to strengthen the interaction between their child and themselves. That adoptive child parent dyad is so important. And then I also touched on family preservation services, which is really strengthening the whole family as a family system work to prevent disruption in the adoptive parent relationship. The data from the training survey, the 4 responses received was based off of the quantitative data. So 2 participants reported participation in the evidence-based program, 3 reported knowing about the evidence-based services, and 3 reported current challenges with their children, which then I was able to elaborate which of those modalities would be very effective in helping their child and themselves gain the tools to better support their family stability. The qualitative data was, their feedback was strong, having a different perspective, a trusted person that could help me gain more knowledge, help me learn how to cope through the adoption was one of the feedback received from the survey. And I do not remember if I was told about these programs. I feel maybe talking to more parents about the services from the beginning. So that really helped shine a light that it's important that we do that pre and post-adoption continuum work with our families using the evidence-based program. MPLD really has been impactful for me. It really deepened my commitment to the field of social work. It really helped me to take a moment to pause and reflect on my child welfare journey as a social worker for almost 2 decades. It made me examine what are my next steps. It would be 20 years of practicing social work and helping families. And I really would like to continue to pursue other opportunities, either in leadership position. It helped me gain more confidence in my ability to communicate in front of various audience and working through just learning and investing and stretching my think tank during this time. I would really love to earn my clinical license in the future and hopefully develop more of a collaboration work with policyholders and my current work with different stakeholders through state and county that I'm currently participating in. And then hopefully pursue ongoing learning through learning about grant writing, because I would love to pursue my own nonprofit agency and strengthening families in this work as I continue helping support families. Thank you.